Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, ma'am. കേൾക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ട്.
Okay, fine. Okay. Now listen. Today we are going to discuss about a topic called as tribal problems, tribal issues, tribal problems. All right. Now, your notes is done mostly. I am in the process of sending it. Maybe after the end of the class, I will send the notes to you. Like last class discussed in the e-class in the notes. Together, there are some 40 pages, 40 odd pages. So that will be forwarded to you in your group. Make sure that you download it, and if possible, take a printed copy. All right, because usually when you take printed copy, you will not lose it. Otherwise, you have the habit of losing our telegram group. Maybe it will be lost in the group. So maybe if it's possible, then take printed notes. All right. Right. So today we are going to discuss about a topic called as tribal issues. Please share my screen. Any question about tribes and the problems of tribal issues, problems of tribes, must have 2-3 points. Okay, follow me very, very closely on this. Any question that has got tribal issues, tribal related problem, must have certain important keywords. First is, maybe you can take this down also, or maybe you can remember this: certain committee reports. Most importantly, there is a committee report called as Virginius Saksa Committee Report. This committee report even എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് പറഞ്ഞത് with regard to tribes and their issues? What is this committee's recommendation? Maybe if you can write about this, it would be better. Yeah, notes, I will be including all of it, but I'm just telling to you. Okay, so you should be having the Saksa committee report. You should be mentioning about um, Debar Commission, Buria Commission, and so on. So this, out of this guy Virginius Saksa is very important. So basically, Virginius Saksa, he is a person who is very well renowned. He went to many tribal areas, made a study about what are their problems. So his mainly his area of study included domains like what are the educational problems faced by the tribes, what are the health problems faced by the tribes, what are the uh, displacement problems which is being faced. Displacement problems എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് displacement problems? Like there can be a dam constructed. There can be a dam constructed, so the dam will displace a certain amount of people from a certain area. So there will be some mining project, there will be an industrial project. For that, certain land will be acquired by the government, and because of that, certain people will be displaced from the area. We call that as development induced displacement. Development induced displacement. Okay, apart from committee reports, you should be quoting about certain statistics. What about the anemia rate with regard to females in tribes? What about the literacy ratio of ST people? What happens to the IMR, infant mortality ratio of the tribal people? So certain hardcore statistics may be out of the census report of 2011 or something like that. This also I will give you the data. All right. So these are some things which will further enhance your answer, and it will show that you have done a very detailed study about your subject. So make sure you're doing that. All right. So let's start the first thing, tribal issues. First thing, can you tell me some of the, so this is the points that you should be writing for answer writing practice, answer writing. What are the key points that you should be included? But apart from this, can you tell me, let me clear this. Can you tell me some wide problems which has been faced by the tribes? Can you tell me some problems which is being faced by the tribes? You can put it in the chat box.
Famine.
Sorry, famine. Okay, let me get it. Lack of health facilities, malnutrition,
Education.
education,
Connectivity.
education. What is it?
The connectivity, both the
Connectivity, exactly,
roads
connectivity.
and network, roads and that telephone.
Roads and telephonic, okay. Any form of connectivity, fine. Rehabilitation and displacement, very good, very good. That's in fact the best, the basic problem that the rehabilitation and displacement. Mortality, any form, seventh one, any form of health indicators, mortality rates. You can include infant mortality, maternal mortality, under 5 mortality. All right. So any form of mortality rate, yes, lack of health facilities, education, under education, you have to include dropout ratios, DOR. What is dropout ratio? People will not be continuing the up to the 12th grade. Rather, they will be dropping out in between. Maybe your 7th standard, maybe in an 8th standard, maybe up to 10th standard, they will come. Or maybe even if they go to graduation, they will not complete the graduation. They will drop in between. So the dropout ratio is pretty high in terms of when you're talking about education. Even otherwise, the literacy rate is very, very, very bad with respect to tribes. What are the other things? Sexual abuse, very important. Sexual abuse. Okay, what happened? Okay. Sexual abuse. Ninth one. Okay. Anything else? We can add 2-3 important points also. Maybe you can take this down. Maybe you can take this down. Apart from this, you can add very, very important, something that's closely related to sexual abuse is human trafficking. Maybe for labor, maybe for skin trade. What is skin trade? Basically prostitution. Labor, skin trade, free, cheap labor on a skin trade, or maybe any other form of trafficking that you can think of, human trafficking. 10th one, 10th one, they are highly prone to drug and substance abuse. Drug and substance abuse. Alcoholism is very highly prevalent amongst the ST communities, the scheduled tribe community. Alcoholism is very, very highly prevalent. Tobacco, marijuana consumption, these are all highly prevalent amongst the tribal people. Livelihood is heavily affected by modern laws. Like, I'll tell you what is this point, and we will tell this point in detail. That is, there were many colonial laws. Like, for example, the Indian Forest Act of 1927. Okay, so this was a colonial law set up by the British, and it said that whatever forest resources that we are getting, it belongs to the government and not to the people. And in fact, in the name of development, the tribes were removed from their native lands and they were put in some other areas. So this is what we call it as displacement. So this was very highly prevalent because of the Indian Forest Act. And later we corrected it very recently. It took many years for us to correct it. And very recently, in the 2006 Forest Rights Act. What is this Forest Rights Act? Anybody? It is the Scheduled Tribes and Other Forest Dwellers Act 2006. You heard of this? Scheduled Tribes and Other Forest Dwellers Act of 2006. Simply, it is called as Forest Rights Act. Detailed name is this. So that actually corrected this livelihood aspect to some extent because it gave the control of the mineral resources, minor minerals, forest resources, minor forest produce into the hands of the scheduled tribes. So that is something that was recently corrected. All right. But historically, there has been too many injustices that was committed over the forest dwellers. So these are the various problems that are being faced by the scheduled tribes. All right. Now, if you look at the lack of health facilities, this is also very, very important. Anemia. I mean, this and this can be interlinked, right? So anemic problem, another major problem is malaria. See, malaria comes whenever there is a overpopulation of mosquitoes, and mosquitoes is very, very, very largely developed in the case of forest areas. Therefore, the scheduled tribe people are highly prone to this disease of malaria. Malaria is very curable when it comes to the city dwellers. Namakka hospital poeta, we can cure it, right? Malaria is very well curable. Dengue is very, very curable. Yes, it affects your blood cells and all of that, but it is curable. But when the same diseases strike the ST population who are in the forest, they will be, or those diseases will be even fatal to them. Those diseases will be even fatal / lethal to them, that it will even kill them. All right. So take down some points, maybe. Take down some points. Tribal issues have the heading. See, one thing I have to tell you. What is it? Can cultural threat? Yes, yes. I forgot to include this. 12th point. cultural threats എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട് who Nandulal, I believe. Now there is a term for it called as acculturation. What is acculturation? See, understand, um, every tribal group have their own customs, have their own culture, have their own traditions. Now when they come up and when they see what we people are doing, maybe in the daily life, what we guys are doing, maybe we drink, maybe we eat a pizza, we drink a coke, we consume many television serials, and soap operas are nothing but serials. So we take in all of that, right? We talk about many things. We talk about movies, we talk about modern fast foods and stuff like that. These are not known to the tribal people. Now they come and they see this, they come in contact with this, they come in contact with the outside world. They are becoming vulnerable to the exploitation of the outside world. They are coming in contact with the culture of the outside world. This is called as mixing of culture, otherwise known as acculturation. They will think, okay, only if we leave behind our traditional culture and follow the culture of what these people are following, we will be accepted in the mainland. Therefore, we should leave behind our culture. This kind of thought, this is very detrimental. They will think inferior of themselves and they will think these people are very superior. Actually, it is not like that. Their traditional knowledge of medicines, their traditional knowledge of forest resources is something that we do not have, right or wrong. We do not know how forest can be exploited. We do not know which is the medicines which is available in the forest. We do not know what is the harmful plants which is available in the forest. This is the traditional knowledge of the tribal people. That is their strength. You should not, or we rather, we should not think that the tribal people are inferior. How will we behave? We will behave, we are the superior people and they are the inferior people. And this will lead to a complex issue, complexity in the minds of the tribes, and they will feel that their culture is very bad. So this is another problem which is being faced by the tribes. All right, we will write about all of this. We will write about all of this. Now, what I need to tell you is the notes which I am supposed to be sharing with you. Follow me closely. The notes which I am supposed to be sharing with you, it will contain a detailed analysis of all the tribal problems. But what I am going to dictate for you right now, that will not be there in the notes. So make sure that you follow the printed notes along with the dictated material. Are you getting me? Dictated material has got some updation. The printed notes is kind of traditional old age stuff. So follow dictated notes plus the printed material. All right. Right. Now take down. Tribal issues of the people. Have the heading as tribal issues. Tribal issues of the people is mainly because of, and take down a bit fast, low human development, less political representation, and heavy cultural discrimination. And heavy cultural discrimination. Have the first heading, number one, and number one, no, write like this. This poverty of tribes is attributed due to the following reasons. This poverty is attributed to the following reasons. Number one, various repressive, various repressive, repressive means, repressive means, backward thinking colonial laws, various repressive colonial laws. Since the time of British, laws like the Indian Forest Act of 1927 gave the control of forest resources to the state, and the traditional forest community were regarded as encroachers. Put encroachers within double quotes. This legacy was carried forward even after independence, and till as late as 2006, when the Forest Rights Act came up. When the Forest Rights Act came up. FRA for the first time recognized the relationship between forest, its resources, and forest dwelling communities. Because of such repressive colonial laws, the rights of tribal population over forest resources like minor forest produce got compromised, and the tribes who depended on these products lost their source of livelihood. A large population of tribes work in primary sector like nomadic hunters, pastoralist, collectors of forest produce, subsistence agriculture, etc. So such laws attributed to loss of livelihood and poverty amongst the tribes. Second one, number two, flawed model, flawed model of development for tribal regions. Another reason, have this as the side heading and take down. Another reason for lack of human development is the flawed model of development which was taken up post-independence. Developmental projects like mining, industrial units, construction of dams led to development-induced displacement. This is very, very important. Underlying development induced displacement. Another reason which caused forced migration among the tribes was when the forested areas were declared as reserved forest or protected forest. Because of this, full stop, protected forest, full stop. Because of this displacement and land alienation, tribes became vulnerable to the exploitation of the outside world. This process of tribes coming in contact with the outside world is called acculturation. This creates a kind of identity crisis. Underline acculturation, underline identity crisis. This creates a kind of identity crisis amongst the tribal groups where they are neither the part of old ways of life, nor are they able to adapt to modern ways of life. This makes them prone to substance abuse, human trafficking, and huge indebtedness. I hope everybody understood the meaning of the word substance abuse. Substance abuse means you're drug addicts, all right? Substance abuse means you're being drug addict. Okay. Right. Now, the next point is very, very important to scientists actually. Do not write, just listen to me. Verrier Elvin and M.N. Srinivas. They studied about this practice of tribal acculturation. Our, they studied very in detail about what is happening with the people, and they found out that they are the ones who actually said that they are because of acculturation, because of the influence of the outside world, people are people are losing their traditional cultural values. The tribes are engaging in more sorts of drug abuse, substance abuse, and so on. So you have to write a mention about these two people. Take down the next point. Verrier Elvin and M.N. Srinivas studied about tribal acculturation and they were the first to offer this view that the this view about the deplorable എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ bad deplorable conditions of life, deplorable conditions of life of the tribal people because of their contact with the outside world. Here also underline Verrier Elvin and M.N. Srinivas. Both of them are very, very important. Okay, next point. Next point. Hmm, Another prominent person who has done a detailed analysis of the tribal issues was Virginius Saxa. So, and have the heading as Virginius Saxa report. Findings of Virginius Saxa report. Number one, or have the heading as number one, education, and under that write as point A, B, C, D, like that. Okay, first point under education, A, tribals educational status grow at a slow pace. There has been a wide gap between the literacy levels of tribal population and general population. Next point, the dropout rate amongst the tribes is very high. The, for example, the dropout rate at class 10 level, at class 10 level for tribal population is as high as 75%. This high dropout rate also compromises the higher education of tribal population. Next point, the overall participation of tribals in higher education was just 1.6% as compared to 90% for general population. Then write about number two, health parameters. And then write number one or A and write this first point. Life expectancy at birth for tribal population is 61 years, which is several years less than the life expectancy of the general population. Within bracket, write 66 years. So what does this point mean? For the general population, if you expect the life expectancy to be 66 years, for the tribes, it is only 61 years. Okay. And write some other data also. IMR and under 5 mortality rate. Write like this. Draw a table, ST, general population. So IMR for ST is at 88 per 1,000 live births. For here it is 68. For under 5 mortality it is 130, and here it is 96. All right. Now take another number three, nutritional status. That should be your heading, nutritional status. And there also you have to write some couple of points. About 50%, first point under nutritional status. About 50% of the tribal children are found to be underweight in preschool age. Number two, next point. 70% of the tribal women suffer from anemia as compared to 50% in general population. Number three, third point, dietary intake. Dietary intake of tribal households showed large deficiencies in protein, energy, fats, and other important nutrients like iron and calcium. Next point. Tribes face high mortality rates even in curable diseases like malaria, dehydration, etc. Next point. Tribes are susceptible to substance abuse. Susceptible, what is the other word for susceptible? We can write prone. They are highly likely to be affected by. It means something like this. Are susceptible to substance abuse as high levels of consumption of tobacco within bracket 70% and alcohol within bracket 50% is found in tribal population. Okay, so these are just the problems which is being found in the tribal population. These are just problems. Okay, so educational problems, what are the development problems, displacement, mining displacement problems. So these are some of the problems. Now when I forgot to mention that point, maybe see the place where you wrote development induced displacement, this bird you wrote, no, maybe take one example here. Take one example here. Mm, have you spotted this development induced displacement? Just take some example for that, one example for that. Nyamgiri case of Odisha. What is this case basically? So there was a place in Odisha called as Nyamgiri. This is a tribal inhabited place. All right. So it is inhabited by a set of PVTGs called as Dongria Kond. A company called as Vedanta. They wanted to, Odisha has got excellent reserves of bauxite, all right. So they wanted to indulge in bauxite mining. And they asked the people there to displace from that area because we want to mine bauxite from this region, so please move away. But the tribes were very strong. They said, no, we are not moving anywhere. uh, this is our land, you're not going to remove us from this place. And then they took the this case was taken to the court. And you know what Supreme Court said? Supreme Court clearly said that Gram Sabha has got the power to decide whether they should move from this place, whether they are willing to move from this place or not. So whatever needs to be done, the decision is to be done by only on the permission of the Gram Sabha. So Vedanta, if you want to undertake bauxite mining, please ask the permission of the Gram Sabha. And then Gram Sabha declared very strongly, you are not given permission to exploit our village, just get out of our village. And a multinational company like Vedanta could not find a proper place in Odisha, in this village of Nyamgiri. So this is the power that was given to them under Forest Rights Act of 2006. And so this was again excellently used by the Supreme Court as well as the Gram Sabha people. So maybe you can take this down as an example. Maybe you can take this down as an example. All right. Right. Take down the next another problem, Anand. So take down, continue in that problem area only. Forced displacement and land alienation. Even in fact, here also you can write this forced displacement and land alienation. Okay, take down almost 60% of the forest cover of the country is found in tribal areas. The states with largest forest cover like Madhya Pradesh, write in short forms MP, like Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, also have high tribal population. Full stop. In these forests were classified as wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, protected or reserved forest. It led to marginalization of tribal communities. Underline marginalization of tribal communities who were treated as encroachers on their own land. Right in next paragraph, the tribal belt are also mineral rich regions of the country. About 50% of the top mineral producing districts are tribal districts found in the states of Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand. Much of the land of these mineral belts have been diverted for mining purposes. And setting up of industrial units. This resulted in loss of livelihood and displacement of tribal communities. Dam construction also caused enforced migration for tribal people. The total population of India, which is displaced due to construction of dams, is about 50 to 60 million, 50 to 60 million, and about 40% of those displaced are STs. However, if we take into account the overall displacement, if we take into account the overall displacement due to dams, mining projects, industrial units, and forest conservation efforts, then tribes constitute 60% of the displaced population. So what are we telling here? Suppose let's say that we are talking about dam induced displacement alone, then about 40% of the displaced population are STs. If we are talking about the overall displacement, that is because of forest conservation, that is because of dam, mining projects, industrial units, etc., somewhere about 60% of the population, displaced population, are STs. Okay, so that is what we are telling here. And understand what is the total percentage of, always draw pie charts whenever you find something in percentages. All right. Now, what about the total population of STs in the country? I have given the data already. 8.6%. 8.6% is the total. Last class, I remember telling this data. ST population is about 8.6% of the total population. So when you see 60% of 8.6% is like a huge number. Already 8.6% is very, very, very small. Out of that, if I say out of the total displacement project, 60% are ST, then that means a huge, huge, huge number of ST people are directly being affected because of such developmental projects. All right. So that is forced displacement and land alienation. Now, next heading, solutions for tribal issues. Solutions for tribal issues. Now follow me. Before writing anything, just follow me. There are three approaches. Okay, government has undertaken three approaches. First approach, a reformist approach. Do not write, just listen. Reformist approach. What is reformist approach? So they thought these people are socially secluded, they are geographically, they are isolated. So that's the reason why they are facing too many problems. Maybe if we also give them education, if we introduce them to modern way of living, if we reform them, that's their idea. So this was a technique which was followed from British times. This was a technique that was followed since British times. Reformist. They are very backward. This was their idea. They are very, very backward. Let us try to bring some socio-economic reforms. But this backfired. This technique backfired by means of intense revolts from the tribal community. It backfired by the means of revolts from the tribal groups. They thought, why are these people coming and intervening into our way of life? They are disturbing our way of life. So they thought the government was intervening, interventionist. They thought it was a reformist approach, but the tribals thought that it was an interventionist approach. And it backfired. All right. So this was the first approach. How did the British bring about socio-economic reforms? Remember the Christian missionaries that they sent into Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, and so on. So that was a form of reforming them. That was their way of reforming the tribal people. Then came the second approach, isolationist approach. Wait. isolationist approach. This was something that India followed immediately after independence. And by British India, after this excessive tribal revolts, British also took to this form of isolationist approach. Even post independence, also we followed a bit of isolationist approach. What is this? From the name itself, we can understand. Let us not disturb them. Whatever these people are doing, let them continue to do. Let us not disturb them, so that we can also live peacefully. They can also live peacefully. So that is isolationist approach. But then this also backfired. This also backfired because they were facing a lot of health problems. They were not socially, they were very, very backward. They were not educated. So this also backfired. This also backfired. Then they came up with a third approach, which is the modern approach, which is the modern approach, which is actually a mix of approach one and approach two. It's a balance between approach one and approach two. So this is the modern approach. The objectives was just two things. The aim of the modern approach was just two things. A, socio-economic development. B, safeguarding the tribes against safeguarding against any forms of exploitation. The modern approach is just concerned about two things. What is it? Socio-economic development and safeguarding against any forms of exploitation. For this, with these two as aims, with these two as aims, Nehru came up with his own idea of how to implement this modern approach. How to implement this modern approach. And that is called as Nehru's Panchsheel of tribal rights. Very, very, very important. Now, all of this, whatever I'm discussing in today's class is very important. Panchsheel of tribal rights. What is this Panchsheel? Panchsheel, what is Panchsheel? That there are some 5 policies which you have to be following with respect to tribal issues. The first important aspect is, the first important point of Panchsheel of tribal rights is, number 1, do not write, we will write this in detail, not right now. Tribal areas നമ്മൾ ഒത്തിരി പ്രൊട്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പാടില്ല, പിന്നെ അതിനെ നമ്മൾ ഓവർ അഡ്മിനിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്യാൻ പാടില്ല. We should not be intervening too much into their problems. That's the first thing. The second thing is, let us respect their culture. The third thing is, forest rights freedom should be given to these kind of tribal people, recognizing the forest rights of the tribal people. As much as possible, let us not intervene in their way of life. Fourth point. Fifth one is, let us bring about some development in terms of health and education, so that upgrades their standard of living. So health and education matram let the government concentrate for. So this is the Panchsheel of tribal rights as given by Nehru. So take down from the beginning major approaches for tribal problems in India. Number 1, reformist approach. One second. Reformist approach. This was based on the assumption that the poor condition of tribes was because of their social and geographical isolation. full stop. It treated tribes as backward and uncultured. Underline backward and uncultured. So the solution which was offered was interventionist, underline interventionist, which focused upon modifying tribal culture and ways of life. This led to creation of an inferiority complex amongst the tribes, and consequently many tribal revolts erupted because of the policies followed during British colonialist times. Within bracket, you can write example Christian missionaries intervention. Number 2, isolationist approach. In the backdrop of failure of the first approach, this approach was adopted where the tribes were totally abandoned and isolated. This caused complete and total neglect of their tribal health, education, and social parameters, and this was also not successful. Number 3, mixed or modern approach. Mixed or modern approach. Two main objectives were followed in this approach. Number 1, socio-economic development. Number 2, safeguarding the tribes against any forms of exploitation. The mixed approach is a fine balance between isolationist and reformist approach. This is the approach that is now being used in almost all tribal development programs. The modern approach nowhere aimed to change the tribal culture or ways of life. As per Nehru's Panchsheel of Tribal Rights, number 1, as per Nehru's Panchsheel of Tribal Rights, the following 5 points were considered to be the key areas of mixed approach. Number 1, tribal areas should not be over administered with a multiplicity of schemes. Number 2, respecting the tribal culture. Number 3, recognizing forest rights. Number 4, minimal intervention in their way of life. Number 5, development in health and literacy parameters. Next one, next heading, take down. Next heading, various tribal development initiatives in India. Various tribal development initiatives in India. Again, I'm repeating, please follow me carefully. Again, I'm repeating, this has to be combined with what I am giving in your printed material. That and this has to be combined and you have to write it as an answer. All right. And now give me a minute, I'll be back. Okay. So take down constitutional provisions. First heading is constitutional provisions. Under Schedule 5 and Schedule 6, administration of scheduled areas and administration of tribal areas are undertaken respectively. Are undertaken respectively. In the 1970s, as per Debar Commission recommendation, let me clear this. In 1970s, as per Debar Commission recommendation, integrated integrated tribal development approach integrated tribal development approach was started from fifth 5-year plan onwards. Fifth 5-year plan onwards. This is in turn based on the mixed or modern approach. To achieve this ITDA, to achieve this ITDA, the government came up with a strategy called Tribal Subplan Strategy, TSP, Tribal Subplan Strategy. During the fifth 5-year plan, tribal subplans were drawn at the block or tehsil level. Block level or tehsil level. Now understand, let me quickly explain this. What is this all about? So 1970s, there was this Debar commission that was set up. And out of that, they thought, let's have an integrated tribal development project. That is, let's not concentrate only on the socio-economic parameters or only on the health parameters, something like that. Let's concentrate on the holistic region-based development, holistic tribal region-based development. So the first thing that they thought was, they have two things in their mind. Chala states, there was a too much of ST population. Like for example, the northeastern states. Yes or no? These are some of states which has got too much of tribal population. For example, Chhattisgarh. For example, Jharkhand. These are the states which have got too much of tribal population. Then there are other states, like for example, if you take Kerala, for example, if you are taking West Bengal, for example, these are states, Tamil Nadu, any state. These are states which have dispersed tribal population. So they understood, the government understood, here they are having overall majority of tribes or tribal population. Then there are some states which are having dispersed tribal population. So they understood something. These states, at least for the sake of votes, they will concentrate on the improvement of their people in general, because when most of the people are tribes, they will definitely concentrate on the improvement of the people. But the problem lies with this kind of states. Here they will not take care of the ST population. And that is why they thought, let us bring about a tribal sub-plan strategy, because here the people, the tribes are concentrated in pockets, in pockets. So it is very difficult for us to identify the tribal people and concentratedly give them some developmental plans. So they wanted to concentrate more on such states, because what is the major advantage? Irrespective of whether there is a separate plan or not, there is too much of tribal people. So no matter what happens, at least for the sake of voting, what will do? The state government will have to take care of the overall population. So Pratyej, for this dispersed tribal population, they thought, let us bring about this tribal strategy, tribal sub-plan strategy. All right. So then they thought, so here the states will get the state funding and they can function out of those state funds. Maybe the finance commission recommendation, etc. There will be some funds which will be given by the center to the state. Apart from that, the state will also have their own revenue. Like that, they can fund for the tribal population. But here, we need to give some exclusive funds to manage the tribal population. And that is the reason why they came up with the TSPs, which was adopted for exclusively for the states that have dispersed tribal population. So during the fifth 5-year plan, the tribal sub-plans were drawn at block or tehsil level. Continue. Tribal sub-plan strategy was adopted for states and union territories which have dispersed tribal population. Funds were allocated under the TSP in proportion of tribal population, in proportion of the tribal population. Full stop. These funds cannot be diverted for any other purpose, and they are non-lapsable. They are non-lapsable. Suppose, let's say, what is non-lapsable? Suppose, let's say that 100 crores are being allocated for a particular state for tribal plan strategy. 95 crore is being spent. Then that 5 crore will be again saved for next year's use. Okay, it will not lapse. So that's a non-lapsable fund. All the activities under the sub-plan were directly under the discretionary powers of the governor, and therefore the issues had high priority, which otherwise could have been ignored. During the sixth 5-year plan, this was modified into modified area developmental approach. This was modified into modified area developmental approach. Over the 7th 5-year plan, next point, over the 7th 5-year plan, planning was done for even smaller population at the hamlet level. At the hamlet level. So what is hamlet level? Like if there is a block and there is a group of families which are connected, maybe they are connected by relatives or they are in a separate area. So like that, small divisions of that block was conducted, and that was hamlet level of planning. So for the seventh 5-year plan, planning for the tribal areas was done at the hamlet level. In 1991, Buria Committee, Buria Committee recommended people-centric plans with an element of self-governance. Underline people-centric plans and element of self-governance. This led to the enactment of PESA Act 1996, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act of 1996. As per this act, the panchayats and gram sabhas of scheduled 5 areas have the following rights. Number 1, power of the gram sabhas to prevent land alienation in scheduled areas. What does this point mean? See, understand, gram sabhas have the right to prevent land alienation. Suppose, let's say that there is a highway project. There is a highway project. Now, this highway project is not liked by the villagers of a panchayat. So, well, you know what they can do? They can say, no, we are not, giving the permission to take away our lands. Our land belongs to ourselves. Like that, if the Gram Sabha passes a resolution, then the government should actually respect it. Should actually respect it. So this is how Gram Sabhas have been given too much of powers with respect to PESA, with respect to land alienation, and what are the other provisions? MFPs. MFPs and minor minerals. So they have complete ownership over the minor forest produce. What is minor forest produce? Bamboo, tendu leaves, some forest wax, honey. So these are minor forest produce, right? Timber and stuff like that. So basically, minor forest produce is also completely, the ownership lies with the Gram Sabhas. Third point, maybe you have to write the second point. It provided ownership over minor forest produce. Third point, power to control local plants, including tribal subplants. Fourth point, right of prior recommendation and prior informed consent. Underline prior informed consent for granting the license for mining. So if you have to mine something in these tribal areas, whose permission should you obtain? You should be obtaining the permission of the Gram Sabhas. So that is also another power that was given to the Gram Sabhas. Next point or next law, the Forest Rights Act of 2006 recognized and restored the rights of tribal communities over forest and forest resources. As per FRA 2006, as per this act, and write point number 1. So you have 4 points. So point number 1. Tribes living historically in forest were given land and forest rights. So actually, let me elaborate on this point. So there are certain scheduled tribes, right? So scheduled tribes, if they are living there and if they are undertaking agriculture there, the scheduled tribes will naturally have rights over the forest lands. But sometimes some other people who are not scheduled tribes, they will also go settle in the forest. And you know what is the what's their problem? They will not belong to the scheduled tribes. For that, the government recently came with the Forest Right Act of 2006, where where even if you are belonging to the other communities, other forest dwellers, you call them as other forest dwellers, even if you are belonging to some other communities, you will be given the right over the forest lands, provided that you have some sort of proof to show them that 3 generations of your family have previously settled in those forest areas. What should you prove? You should prove that 3 generations of your families have actually settled in these forest areas. So since December 2005, I think it's 13th December 2005, if I'm not wrong, from this you have to show up to this you have to show that 3 generations of your families have been residing in this forest. We are maybe if we are undertaking agriculture, we are selling the agricultural produce for 3 generations, some form of proof. Okay, so that is then also you will be given complete ownership of that particular forest area and the forest resources. You will not be asked to remove from that area. So that is about the first point. That is about the first point. Second point, tribes were given extended rights over MFP and rights to use the forest area for grazing cattle. Third point, land is to be used for forest purposes only, and local ecology should not be disrupted. Fourth point, tribes were given rights against forced displacement and eviction without any adequate compensation. All right. So that concludes PESA and FRA. Both are very, very important from your exam perspective. These are the governmental side initiatives. So first of all, what did we start with? We started with constitutional provisions. Then we moved on to committee recommendations and 5-year plans. And then we moved on to certain acts. So we dealt with 2 acts, which is FRA 2006 and the PESA Act of 1996. Okay. Right. Now, take down the heading. Virginia Saxa High-Level Committee on Socio-Economic, Virginia Saxa High-Level Committee on Socio-Economic, Health and Educational Status of Tribes. So in short, Saxa gave some recommendations on 5 disciplines. 5 disciplines, remember, five headings. So one was health, other one was education, third one was the socio-economic welfare activities, welfare or developmental activities. Then What about displacement and rehabilitation? There was one more thing. I forgot it. There was one more thing. So these were the 5 things that was undertaken by JAXA. The fifth thing was included as a part of your notes, but these are the 5 things which was undertaken by JAXA. Previously, what did we write about JAXA committee reports? We wrote about what are the problems that were discussed in the JAXA committee reports. Now we are going to write about certain recommendations that were given under the JAXA committee. So recommendations of livelihood and employment status, first heading. Number one, there is a need to establish agro-based industries and agro-based training institutions in tribal regions. Number two, no, wait, before writing the second point, just listen to this. Agro-based industries and agro-based training institutions. Maybe you can write certain examples here. Example, heard of this Unnat Bharat? Maybe you can Google about this. Unnat Bharat institution, Unnat Bharat Atma. What is Atma? Agricultural Technological Management Agency. Let me get the full form correctly. 1 second. Atma. Agricultural Technology Management Agency. It's not technological, agricultural technology management agency. Unnat Bharat and Agricultural Technology Management Agency. So these are some of the institutions which says how to implement technology in agriculture, how to develop agro-based industries. So maybe you can quote this as examples. Number two. Excuse me. Tribes must be employed in watershed development programs, and forest-based livelihood options like organic farming and eco-forestry. So here, maybe you can take example. What is this organic farming? What can you tell me? A very famous governmental scheme for organic farming. Anybody? Write this down. Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. Heard of this? This is nothing but paramparagat. Like generation wise, how many generation based certain organic farming practices, whatever you have been doing it for ages and ages together. So that is Krishi Vikas Yojana, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, basically for organic farming. And then for watershed development programs, you can take an example, which is Neeranchal program. And take down point number 3, backward area developmental planning is to be based on intellectual and resource potential of the population. Example, art and culture of culture of tribal medicines, right, like this, culture of tribal medicines needs to be encouraged. So you may not know certain values of certain plants, okay, but your grandmothers, your great grandmothers, they will know about, they will continuously say, drink tulasi, you can prevent yourself from cold. So this is what is this basically? This is a traditional knowledge. This is traditional intellectual knowledge of certain people that has to be protected. Okay. So this is the recommendations that was given by Xaksa with respect to livelihood and employment status. Recommendations for education. Recommendation for education. Number one, the purpose of education in tribal areas should be to provide basic understanding of environment and society There should be wait a second. There should be a greater gender focus in education for bridging the gender gap in learning. Number three, adequate infrastructure, classrooms, teachers should be provided for education in tribal areas. At present, there is a lack of trained manpower like doctors, ashas, ANMs, auxiliary midwives. So ANMs, etc. Recommendations for health, next heading. The major constraint, number one, the major constraint for improving the health status of the tribes is deploying human resources into the scheduled areas. Therefore, focus should be upon selecting, training, and deploying local ST candidates as ASHAs, ANMs, and Anganwadi workers. Number two, there should be construction of proper drainage and sanitation infrastructure And measures should be taken to control mosquito breeding, as malaria is one of the biggest reason of mortality in central Indian tribes. Next heading, recommendations for land alienation, displacement, and forced migration. Number one, rights-based approach and rights-based approach and comprehensive rehabilitation is a must for any displacement of tribes. Number two, Gram Sabha's consent should be made mandatory for land acquisition, and effective implementation should be practiced on the ground. Okay, so that is it. That covers your tribal problems. Okay. Any doubts that we have discussed so far? Any doubts in these points? Any doubts? Anything? Any doubts, guys? Anything that you want me to tell again? Maybe go through the notes. If there is something that's problematic, you can ask me right now. Clear, Arno? Okay. Okay. Fine. So we'll move on to the fine. We'll move on to the next one, that is demographic attributes. Okay. Demographic attributes. Right. See, when I tell you the word demographic attributes, it means demography means population, the study of population rather, the study of population with certain characters. Attributes എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ certain characters. What sort of characters? How can I study the population of any given nation with certain characters, certain attributes? Like, for example, what is their literacy rate? What about their mortality rates? What about their the age composition of the population? What about the sex ratio of that particular people? All this will tell me, if suppose let's talk about sex ratio. If let's say that the sex ratio is very very high, like what is happening in what is right now in Kannur, what is happening in Kannur, like not just Kannur, but most of the places in Kerala have got pretty high sex ratio. Why? That shows the advanced levels of societal mentality in the minds of Keralites, right? Yes or no? The literacy is pretty high. They know the value of girl children. They do not disrespect the girl children. They do not think that male children are much superior than girl children. No, nothing like that. But when you go to North India, when you actually are in North India, you will know the difference. So when I went back to North India, I am the only child of my parents, and they were see, look my age. I was almost like 24, 25 back then, and they were pitying my parents. They were telling, "Oh my God, you have only one girl child. What are you going to do?" That's the mentality of people in the north. That's why you see the states like Punjab, Haryana, they have very poor sex ratios, probably because of uh, the notion that girl children is pretty bad. Okay, so that indicates the transition, the demographic transition that a particular state is in. Overall country is in a different demographic state, I mean different demographic stage. But if I'm talking about states like most of the southern states, and especially states like Karnataka, Kerala, they are like in a very different demographic transition stage. If I'm talking about mortality rates, then also I can understand the mortality rate of advanced states will be pretty much lower. So anyway, if I'm studying about these demographic attributes, I will come to know about the nature of the population, and I will come to know about the what level of societal transition is that particular state in, how developed are they, that kind of idea. So I will be getting. So the first thing that we are going to learn with respect to demographic attributes is population age structure. Population age structure. So what is this population age structure? Understand? I have, just do not write anything, just follow me. I have certain age groups, and I have a certain degree of population for that particular age group. Like for example, so this is the United Nations Population Fund based definition. Like 0 to 14, how many percentage of population are there? 15 to 60, how many percentage of population are there? Greater than 60, how many percentage of population are there? This studying this will give me my population age structure. This will show the amount of total workforce in a country, or how many people can be employable, how many people can be, or right now can be employable, or in their employable age is this 15 to 60. Greater than 60 is also a dependent population, less than 15 is also a dependent population. So this in turn gives me a set of dependent age group of people. Yes or no? So this is how I can study my population age structure. Take down population age structure, give the heading as demographic attributes, and under that, first of all, let's study about population age structure. It studies the proportion of population, in different age brackets. It forms the basis of planning for policy makers in the country. It is an important input for policy making, as knowing the population in the working age group helps to determine the number of jobs to be created in an economy. Full stop. Similarly, the proportion of population in non-working age group forms the basis of social sector spending on health and education. let us say that you have 0 to 14. Here you need to spend a lot in terms of education. Greater than 60, you have to spend a lot in terms of health, or majorly in terms of health. Even you have to spend on health. For 0 to 5, you have to spend on health. But priorly or majorly, what is the basic need? Education is the need. Even majorly health is the need. So this in turn decides how my social sector spending for dependents, for the dependent age group, how my social sector spending should be decided. I can, this helps in policy analysis or policy making. Okay. Okay. Now it also gives the, following information. It also gives the following information. Number one, it represents the stage in demographic transition. So here, for example, you can write something like this. For example, if from an agrarian society, if we are transitioning to an urban industrialized society, what sort of transition will you be experiencing in the mortality rates? ഇവിടെയാണെങ്കിലോ ഒരു high birth rate, you'll be having a high birth rate, high fertility rate. At the same time, you'll be having high death rate. But here, when it becomes a low urban society, an industrialized society, you'll be having a low fertility rate, you'll be having low death rate. At the same time, you can experience low birth rates also. So the age structure, depending on the age structure, we can decide the age structure, the population age structure, we can decide uh, at what level of the demographic transition is that particular society in. Number two, take down, second point. It can be used to predict the future trends in growth rate, by knowing what is the proportion of population in reproductive age group, Third point, it can be used to depict the proportion of working population and the future trends in labor force addition. Next one, fourth point, it can be used to calculate dependency ratio for a country. So the age brackets as given by UN Population Fund are so 0 to 14, 15 to 60, and 60 plus. For India, this comes out to be something like this. There is 30% here, 62% here, and 8% here. All right. Take down this table. Okay, go for the next heading, literacy rates. Let's take down some points. If there is some difficult point, I will explain. Otherwise, we shall just take down. So number two, literacy rates. So first of all, tell me, how do you measure literacy rates? How do you measure the literacy rates? Basically, I can take the help of enrollment ratio. Enrollment ratio. What is enrollment ratio? How many people have been enrolled in colleges? How many out of the total number of, I will know the total number of children in any given state or something. How many of them are actually coming to the schools? How many of them are actually enrolled in the schools, primary schools, secondary schools, in my higher education schools? How many of them are enrolled for the undergraduation programs? So that is my enrollment ratio. That is my enrollment ratio. After that, how can I calculate? After that, I can calculate based on dropout ratios, dropout rates or dropout ratios. And finally, third important one, mean years of schooling or expected years of schooling. So have you heard of this term, expected years of schooling? You might have read it in economics when you have read it about HDI, Human Development Index. Human Development Index, one of the important parameter for education is calculated by expected years of schooling, right? So since 2010, this has been the parameter that has been used to calculate HDI. Before 2010, this was used as a parameter for calculating HDI, but later on we thought that this expected years of schooling was the most apt parameter. So take down literacy rates. There are different ways and different measures in depicting the achievements in education. Number one, enrollment ratio. Number two, dropout rates. Number three, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. In India, fourth point, in India, our decadal census literacy rates are under our decadal census. Just a second. Under our decadal census, literacy rates is measured for 7 years and above, and in terms of the ability to write one's name in any vernacular language. India has, next point, number 5, India has low literacy levels, and it also lacks in functional literacy, underline functional literacy. Within bracket, functional literacy as defined in the developed countries is the ability to read and comply with instructions on a medicine bottle. So functional literacy in different countries, it is measured or it is defined in different ways. In developed countries, it is defined like this. So in a Benadryl bottle, in a Crocin bottle, some medicines, some instructions will be given, no? If a person is able to read and follow those instructions, he is said to be a functionally literate person. Okay, take down the next point. India also has high male female disparities in literacy, although over the years, this gap has reduced and the female literacy has improved. Take down a small tabular column. Male literacy rate, female literacy rate, overall literacy rate. 2001, 2011, 75.3, 57.7, 64.83, 82.1, 65.5, and 74. So if you observe this, the gap between male and female literacy is pretty high, but this gap is reducing, and that's something that needs to be appreciated. But still, the gap is pretty huge. Now, what you can do is, you instead of 57.7, maybe you can write it as 58. Instead of 75.3, you can write it as 75 in the exams. But right now, just at least for the sake of notes, write it in complete figures. Maybe in the exam, you can write it in whole numbers. You can make an approximation here and there. All right. Can I erase this slide? Take down the next point. Kerala, Lakshadweep, Mizoram, Tripura have the highest literacy rates. Bihar has the lowest literacy rate. Bihar has also recorded the best improvement in literacy rate from 33% in 2001 census to 53% in 2011 census. 33 to 53. India also has a north-south divide in literacy rate, just like for all other parameters. So the south is pretty well developed when compared to the north. So there is a north-south divide in education as well. There is a north-south divide in everywhere, in everything. You take health, you take transport, you take industrial development. There is always a north-south divide. The south is very, very advanced when compared to the north. Now, that's what we are mentioning here. Take down the next heading is sex ratio. Sex ratio is one of the important parameters quick question. Do you guys have any classes between 12 to 1? Do you have any other commitment between 12 to 1? Okay, no, right? I think we can take some more time, maybe some half an hour or something. Maybe we can complete this sex ratio. With that, your chapter will be over. That's why. Yes, I think sex ratio is something that I need to deal with. Apart from that, we can give notes. So sex ratio matram will have this. Sex ratio take down is one of the important parameters for ascertaining the overall human development in particular gender disparities. Inequalities at levels of gender depicts patriarchal, patriarchal and regressive mindsets and regressive mindsets. This is typical of rural areas and traditional conservative societies. Gender issues, next point, gender issues are increasingly acknowledged as an important component of overall human development and also a necessary criteria for long-term sustainable economic development. So what are we discussing here? We are discussing about sex ratio. We are discussing about sex ratio. How do you define sex ratio first of all? How many females are there with respect to 1,000 males, right? How many females are there with respect to 1,000 males? If this ratio is greater than, you know, let's say there are 1,028 females per 1,000 males. This is a very positive symbol, positively, it's a very positive sign for the growth of females. It shows that the mentality of the people is very much progressive in nature. So this is what has been happening in most of the cases, like in Kerala, for example. Like for example, Kerala, there are certain states which is having very poor uh, what do you call sex ratio, like for example 926 out of 1,000, something like that. So this shows patriarchal mindset, which is preference towards the male children, and regressive mindsets, females are not preferred. So this shows that very bad attitude, that when this is there, when the sex ratio is very low, then that means there will be disparity between the male and the female children in terms of nutrition, in terms of sending the girl child to school, everything. All right. So if the sex ratio is poor, then that means there are multiple characters that you can associate that society with. You can say that society, the female will not be allowed to go to school. You can say that the nutrition that is given to a male child, they will be fed with all good nutritious food, but the females, they will be asked to eat the leftover food. This is what we are witnessing in terms of poor sex ratio societies. All right. Take down. Gender issues can be depicted through measures like number one, or A, female nutrition levels, B, female infant mortality rate, C, female life expectancy, D, female literacy rates. Gender issues can be depicted through all of these four cases. Next point. Sex ratio is considered to be a representative index of gender issues. In India, it is measured as number of females per 1,000 males. Next point, India's sex ratio is adverse in comparison to Brazil, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Myanmar. The world average, just a second. The world average is 984 females per 1,000 males. India has a sex ratio of about 940 females per 1,000 males as per census 2011. Now you can write China has a sex ratio of 926. Brazil has a sex ratio of about 1,042 per 1,000 males. Quite recently, as per the National Family Health Survey, fifth National Family Health Survey report, fifth National Family Health Survey report, it has been found that India has about 1,020 females per 1,000 men. This is a huge improvement from the 2011 census. This is a huge improvement from 2011 census. However, analysis shows that sex ratio at birth and sex ratio in the rural areas are still favoring the male community. The improvement in sex ratio, however, is not because of a dramatic preference towards the girl child, but it is because of improvement in medical facilities and overall improvement of poverty levels. In fact, child sex ratio has consistently declined over the years, and it shows a dismal picture, of gender rights in India. So you can take down number one, child sex ratio. You can take down some points. CSR, child sex ratio. The southern states have a better sex ratio. And there is a positive correlationship between sex ratio and literacy levels. Areas of high urbanization attract male migrants and they also have low sex ratio. Next point. Next point. Uh, Kerala, next point, take down. Kerala has the highest sex ratio of 1084 females per 1000 males. This is partly because of the traditional matriarchal culture, along with better educational outcomes under socialist governments. The Union Territory of Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu had the worst urban sex ratio. Put a small hyphen and write 775 women per 1000 men. Delhi, next point, Delhi has the worst rural sex ratio, and Delhi has the worst rural sex ratio amongst all the states. Put a hyphen and write 859 per 1000. Overall, urban sex ratio is low because of male selective migration from rural to urban areas. Underline this, male selective migration from rural to urban areas. What does this mean? Who will migrate more from what will happen in the urban areas? Male will migrate more from the rural areas towards urban areas. So നമ്മൾ urban areas ഒരു sex ratio നമുക്ക് analyze ചെയ്ത് നോക്കുമ്പോൾ what will happen? What will happen? There will be more number of males than females, right? So that is why there will be a too much of, or there will be a poor sex ratio in the urban areas, basically because of male selective migration. Because of male selective migration. Just a second. Analysis indicates, write down the next point. Analysis indicates 19 states and union territories had a lower sex ratio than the natural standard, and the sex ratio at birth was more skewed. Skewed is skewed, was more skewed in urban areas than rural centers. was more skewed in urban areas than rural centers. That what does this point mean? Understand? Let's come to the explanation later, but just understand this point. There is a lower sex ratio when I'm talking about many states, and this sex ratio is more skewed in urban areas, meaning when I am calculating some of the urban areas sex ratios, it is highly in favor of male children. Why? Because of advancement in medical technologies. Advancement in medical, do not write, just listen. Advancement in medical technologies, you know what the women will do? They will engage in sex determination technique, prenatal sex determination techniques. Even when they are carrying at a certain uh, at a certain trimester, they will know the sex of the baby. They will analyze the sex of the baby, and the doctors, though they are not supposed to reveal it to the parents, to the couple, they will reveal it, and this will, and they will they will engage in um, feticide. They will kill the fetus. They will kill the fetus if it is a female. So this is happening, and that's because of advancement in medical technologies, which is being taken as an advantage in the case of urban areas. So take down that point also. That point also. Because of the advancements in medical technology, couples couples engage in prenatal sex determination techniques, and female feticide has increased. Abortion tourism has been growing, where people go to countries like Thailand, where laws are not as strict as like in India. So they engage in something called as abortion tourism. So they go to countries like Thailand, Bangkok, especially. They go there, they abort, and they come back. So this is something that's been happening. We call it as abortion tourism. So there is something called as medical tourism, which is legal, like people from Bangladesh, people from Pakistan, people from Myanmar, they come to places like Chennai, maybe for heart issues, maybe for some things, and they come to Chennai, they undertake treatment, they go back to their hometowns, which is perfectly legal. But abortion tourism is not something that has to be encouraged. But laws in certain countries like Thailand are not that strict, and therefore people go there. Those whoever can afford, they go there, they abort the fetus, and they come back, which is very, very bad. Despite stringent laws and penalties associated with sex determination and pregnancy termination, the low and declining child sex ratio suggests that the social bias against girl children continues. It is to be noted that less number of girl children does not improve the status of women in the future, as this will lead to more exploitation, trafficking, prostitution, as happened in states like Punjab and Gujarat. Okay, so that is it. That concludes the um, complete chapter of cultural setting. That concludes cultural setting. Uh, yes, someone has switched on their audio. Okay, let me. Okay, that concludes your chapter. Now, have you seen this notes that I have given? Yes, have you received it? I suppose you have received it. I just now have sent it. Yes, you have received it, right? There is a doc file which is cultural setting. Yes. Now make sure you are following that part also. Now that has issues up to tribal problems. Okay. I will be sending more notes with respect to demographic attributes also. I will be sending maybe today or maybe tomorrow. I will send you notes on demographic attributes. Add that along with this notes. Okay. Is that clear? So next class we'll be starting a new chapter. We'll be starting a new chapter. Let's see, and let's see in the next class. Is there any issues with this? Is there any issues with this chapter? So 3 chapters have been done: cultural settings, your settlement patterns of India, and population and settlement geography, chapter number 3. We will be moving on to the next chapter, which is regional planning. Okay, that's a small chapter. That also will be number, just a second. Chapter number regional planning is chapter number 4, that will be taking along with chapter number 8 of paper 2. So in short, we'll be covering 2 chapters. Okay. Chapter number 4 of paper 1 and chapter number 8 of paper 2 will be covered together. All right. Any issues, any doubts that you need to ask, anything that's bothering you? Fine. Any doubts that you have? Fine then. We'll leave the class. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.